A 7-0 Indiana run. They're within 2 and a foul. This
to Howard for the finish.
Indiana.
It's Paige Bueckers shoving Sophie Cunningham, and Sophie getting that foul call.
It's bad enough when you have the referees being so incompetent, so inconsistent, clearly calling things one way for a certain player and calling it another way for another player.
Oh, you thought the drama would cool down just because Caitlin Clark wasn't on the court? Think again. Last night's Fever vs. Dallas game at Gainbridge Fieldhouse turned into an absolute circus of biased officiating, dirty plays, and Sophie Cunningham getting absolutely screwed by refs who apparently think Paige Bueckers walks on water. What happened in Indianapolis wasn't basketball. It was a masterclass in how to gift wrap a victory for a struggling Dallas team while completely railroading one of the league's toughest defenders.
Look at that whistle go to work. That whistle going to work. You gotta be kidding me, man. Sophie literally has her hands up. Paige Bueckers pushing her. And you called the foul on Sophie. What did she do? Did she not accept the push right? How was she supposed to accept the push? Was she supposed to fall on her back? Well, she ran into Howard. I mean, was everybody supposed to fall? What happened?
This is the only league I know where Paige Bueckers can literally shove Sophie Cunningham with 2 hands, shove Sophie Cunningham, yet the foul is on Sophie Cunningham. It's bad enough when we have that going against us.
Sophie Cunningham got called for fouls that would make even blind referees blush with embarrassment, and when the dust settled, the Wings escaped with an 81-80 victory that had more controversy than a reality TV show finale. Smash that like button and drop Ref Revolt in the comments, because what you're about to hear will make your blood boil harder than a Phoenix summer. The setup for this disaster couldn't have been more obvious if the refs had worn Dallas jerseys to the arena. Caitlin Clark was sidelined with her groin injury, marking her 20th missed game of the season, which already had Fever fans nervous about their playoff positioning. The Wings came in desperately needing a win after losing 5 straight games and sitting at a pathetic 8-24 record, basically playing spoiler to teams actually trying to make something of their season.
Today's game against the Wings was a bad one, a bad loss. Based on Stephanie White, I'm based at the referees.
You lose at home to the Dallas Wings that lost to the gum on the bottom of the shoe, Chicago Sky 3 times. They lost to the Sky 3 times. You lose to the Dallas Wings. Man, stop it.
Coach Stephanie White rolled out a starting lineup featuring Kelsey Mitchell, Lexi Hull, Sophie Cunningham, Natasha Howard, and Aaliyah Boston, basically daring Dallas to try and steal one on their home court. What nobody expected was that the real opponent wouldn't be wearing Wings uniforms, but would instead be the 3 blind mice masquerading as WNBA officials who apparently got their whistles from a cereal box. Within minutes of tip-off, it became crystal clear that Paige Bueckers was going to get the royal treatment from these refs, and Sophie Cunningham was going to be their sacrificial lamb. Early in the first quarter, Paige went up for a 3-pointer and Sophie did what any competent defender does. She contested the shot. But here's where things got absolutely ridiculous. Sophie stepped slightly into Paige's landing space, causing the Wings rookie to land on her foot, which is admittedly a foul in today's overly protective WNBA.
We have Paige pushing off Sophie Cunningham, play after play after play after play after play. Look, this is one instance right here. Sophie draped all over Paige. Paige pushing off Sophie Cunningham, yet that's a foul on Sophie Cunningham. I have no idea how. We have Paige pushing off Sophie Cunningham, yet that's a foul on Sophie Cunningham. I have no idea how. We have Paige getting guarded by Sophie Cunningham, pushing off Sophie Cunningham again, yet, of course, this is going to be a foul on, you guessed it, Sophie Cunningham. Sophie Cunningham, deny, face guard, hands are up, Paige pushes off. Oh, yep, that's a foul on Sophie Cunningham.
Fine, call the foul, give her 2 free throws, and move on. But these refs weren't satisfied with just a regular foul. Oh no, they had to escalate it to a flagrant foul for what they called a reckless closeout. A flagrant foul. For a standard defensive play that happens literally dozens of times every single game across the league. Sophie wasn't trying to injure anyone. She wasn't being malicious. She was playing defense the way every coach from youth basketball to the pros teaches it. But apparently, when you're defending Paige Bueckers, normal basketball plays become flagrant violations worthy of 3 free throws and possession for Dallas. The most infuriating part about this flagrant call wasn't just that it was completely bogus, it was that Sophie was coming from Paige's side, not directly underneath her, which makes the dangerous aspect of this play even more laughable. If you watch the replay, Sophie is clearly making a legitimate basketball play and the contact was incidental at worst. But these refs saw an opportunity to set the tone for how this game was going to be officiated, and they took it with both hands.
Paige Bueckers can land on somebody's foot, flagrant foul, 3 free throws and the ball back. Kelsey Mitchell can land on somebody's foot, just a common foul. Here, go take your free throws, and Dallas Wings will take the ball the other way. We have Sophie Cunningham going head-to-head against Paige Bueckers, smothering Paige Bueckers. Paige Bueckers pushing off every time down the court because she's not fast enough, not quick enough to create space, fighting around screens, fighting through screens, going baseline to baseline. So what does she need to do? She needs to push off on Sophie Cunningham to get herself open. Now, I know what you guys might be thinking. All right, Paige is pushing off Sophie, so there must be calling fouls on Paige. Incorrect, you are.
3 free throws for Paige, possession back to Dallas, and a clear message sent to every Fever player that touching their golden child would result in immediate punishment. The Gainbridge Fieldhouse crowd was absolutely livid, and rightfully so, because they were watching their team get jobbed in real time by officials who apparently thought they were there to escort Paige Bueckers to a victory instead of calling a fair basketball game. But wait, it gets worse, because the officiating disaster was just getting started and Sophie Cunningham was about to become the victim of the most egregious non-call you'll see all season. Late in the second quarter, with about a minute remaining, Sophie was guarding Paige tightly when the Wings rookie decided to take matters into her own hands. Instead of using skill or basketball moves to create separation, Paige straight up shoved Sophie backwards, sending her stumbling with her arms up in the air like she'd just been hit by a truck. Sophie immediately started gesturing to the refs that she'd been fouled, pointing at Paige and basically screaming that she'd been pushed. The whistle blew, everyone in the arena saw the replay on the Jumbotron showing Paige clearly shoving Sophie, and then these absolute clown show refs called the foul on Sophie instead of Paige. Sophie Cunningham got called for a foul after being shoved by Paige Bueckers in front of 20,000 witnesses in multiple camera angles that showed exactly what happened. Sophie's reaction said everything you needed to know about how absurd this call was.
Sophie, you didn't accept the push good enough, all right? You got to accept the push. You looked at her and you breathe on her, all right? You were breathing on her. So when you do that, you get the foul. That's what happens.
Paige Bueckers' whistle is so superior, it makes it look like Asia Wilson doesn't even have one. Paige Bueckers' Wilson is so severe that it makes Brianna Stewart look like she doesn't get enough foul calls. It would be nice if we get some whistles like that in our favor. It would be nice if every time Kelsey Mitchell gets knocked on her butt, taken to the rack, she gets a foul call. It would be nice if AB going to the rack, she would get a foul call. It would be nice if Sophie Cunningham got mauled all game on the offensive end. No foul calls in her favor.
After looking up at the Jumbotron replay and seeing clear evidence that she'd been fouled, Sophie was caught on camera saying "God damn it" with the kind of frustration that every basketball fan in America could relate to. She gestured to the Fever bench to challenge the call, basically begging her coaches to use their challenge on what should have been the easiest overturn in WNBA history. But incredibly, inexplicably, and absolutely infuriatingly, the Fever coaching staff didn't challenge the call, leaving Sophie to deal with another phantom foul that benefited Paige and punished Indiana for playing actual defense. This wasn't basketball, this was professional wrestling, with the refs playing the role of crooked promoters, making sure their chosen star got every possible advantage. The pattern continued throughout the entire game as Paige Bueckers got the kind of whistle that would make even LeBron James jealous during his peak superstar treatment days.
There were some weird ass calls in this game. Why does Paige Bueckers have the SGA pass? You can't even breathe on this girl. First of all, that three she took, should never have been a flagrant one for Sophie Cunningham. She got 3 shots and they got the ball possession. I thought that was a joke.
Because at the end of the day, she gets the whistle because she's with the Rainbow Club. You hear me?
Every time a Fever player breathed on Paige, the refs found a way to call a foul, while Paige was allowed to initiate contact, throw elbows, and play physical basketball without any consequences whatsoever. It was the classic Paige privilege that Wings fans have been celebrating and everyone else has been complaining about since she entered the league. The rookie was getting calls that veteran all-stars dream about, while Sophie Cunningham was getting treated like she was some random scrub who didn't deserve the benefit of the doubt on any 50-50 call. This wasn't even trying to hide the bias. It was officiating with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. Meanwhile, on the Fever bench, Caitlin Clark was watching this officiating disaster unfold with the kind of visible frustration that made it clear she knew exactly what was happening to her teammate. Clark couldn't hide her emotions as she watched Paige pour in shots and get every conceivable advantage from the referees, knowing that when she comes back from injury, she'll have to deal with this same biased treatment that seems to follow certain players around the league. The contrast couldn't have been more obvious. Clark has spent her entire WNBA career getting mauled by defenders without calls, while rookie Paige Bueckers gets treated like she's made of glass and deserves protection that no other player receives. It's the kind of inconsistent officiating that makes fans lose faith in the integrity of the competition. The game itself became secondary to the officiating controversy, but the Fever still managed to make things interesting despite playing 9 players deep and dealing with constant phantom calls. Indiana trailed by as many as 17 points in the second half, watching Dallas build what should have been an insurmountable lead behind balanced scoring and the referee's generous interpretation of what constitutes a foul when defending Paige Bueckers. Maddie Siegrist led the Wings with 22 points in her first start since June, while Lee Uweru added 20 points off the bench to give Dallas the offensive firepower they needed to maintain their advantage. For most of the game, it looked like the Wings would cruise to an easy victory behind their rookie superstar and her personal officiating crew. But this is the WNBA, where no lead is safe, and the Fever have built their identity around never giving up, even when the deck is stacked against them. Indiana mounted a furious fourth quarter comeback that had Gainbridge Fieldhouse rocking and put the fear of God into Dallas players who thought they had the game wrapped up. The Fever went on a 19-3 run to close the game, turning what looked like a blowout into a nail-biting finish that came down to the final seconds. Kelsey Mitchell, playing point guard in Clark's absence, scored 24 points and hit clutch shots down the stretch, while Sophie Cunningham managed to contribute 14 points despite spending most of the game dealing with ridiculous foul calls and non-calls that would have broken lesser players mentally. The final minute was pure chaos as both teams traded baskets and the refs somehow managed to swallow their whistles after spending the entire game calling everything in Dallas's favor. With 33 seconds left, Mitchell hit a tough shot in the lane to bring the Fever within 1 point, setting up a dramatic finish that should have been the story of the game. Paige Bueckers missed a jumper from the free throw line with 14 seconds remaining, giving Indiana one last chance to steal a victory that they probably deserved based on their effort and resilience in the face of adversity. The Fever got the rebound and called timeout with 1.7 seconds left, drawing up a play for Mitchell to try and complete the comeback. Unfortunately, the basketball gods weren't smiling on Indiana that night, as Mitchell's corner three-pointer at the buzzer hit the side of the backboard instead of finding the net for what would have been one of the most satisfying victories in Fever history. The Wings escaped with an 81-80 victory that felt more like highway robbery than a legitimate basketball result, improving to 9-24 on the season. While the Fever dropped to 18-15 and had to deal with the frustration of losing a game they had every right to win. The final stats showed Paige Bueckers with solid numbers across the board, but the real story was how she got those numbers with the kind of favorable officiating that turns basketball games into predetermined outcomes. Sophie Cunningham finished with 14 points on efficient shooting, but more importantly, she showed the kind of mental toughness and competitive fire that makes her invaluable to this Fever team. Getting called for phantom fouls while being ignored on legitimate fouls would have broken most players, but Sophie kept playing hard and contributing on both ends of the floor. Her performance was a perfect example of why Caitlin Clark has praised her teammates' professionalism and basketball IQ, because Sophie found ways to impact the game despite dealing with officiating that was clearly working against her. The fact that she managed to stay composed and productive while getting absolutely screwed by the refs shows exactly why she's become such an important piece of Indiana's championship puzzle. The broader implications of this game go far beyond one regular season loss for the Fever, because what happened in Indianapolis represents everything wrong with WNBA officiating in the modern era. Young superstars like Paige Bueckers are getting protected to an extent that fundamentally changes how defense can be played against them, while established stars like Sophie Cunningham get treated like they're lucky to be on the same court. It's the kind of inconsistent and biased officiating that makes fans question whether games are being decided by the players or by the referees. And last night's disaster was Exhibit A in the case against the current state of WNBA officiating. When a player can literally shove an opponent and have the foul called on the victim, something is seriously broken in the system. Looking ahead, this game sets up some fascinating storylines for the rest of the season and beyond. Caitlin Clark will eventually return from her groin injury with fresh motivation after watching her teammate get jobbed by officials who seem determined to create their own narrative about who deserves success in this league. The rivalry between Clark and Bueckers was already intense based on their college history and draft positions, but now there's an added layer of officiating controversy that will make every future matchup even more compelling. Sophie Cunningham has proven she can handle whatever the refs throw at her, but the question remains whether the league will address the obvious bias that's creeping into games involving certain high-profile rookies. The Fever's playoff positioning took a hit with this loss, but their fight in the fourth quarter showed that this team has the character and resilience to overcome adversity, even when that adversity comes from officials who forgot they're supposed to be impartial. Kelsey Mitchell's leadership in Clark's absence has been remarkable, and performances like her 24-point effort last night prove that Indiana has multiple players capable of carrying the load when needed. The chemistry between Mitchell, Cunningham, Howard, and Boston continues to develop, and adding Clark back to this mix creates a legitimate championship contender that won't be intimidated by biased officiating or manufactured controversies. For Dallas, this victory might feel good in the short term, but winning games because of favorable officiating rather than superior basketball doesn't build the kind of character and toughness needed for long-term success. Paige Bueckers is undeniably talented and will have a great career, but learning to rely on referee protection instead of pure skill could become a problematic pattern that hurts her development as a complete player. The Wings finished the season series against Indiana with a 1-3 record, which tells you everything you need to know about which team is actually better when the games are called fairly and both teams get equal treatment from the officials. The aftermath of this game has WNBA fans across social media demanding accountability from the officiating department and questioning whether certain players are getting special treatment that undermines the competitive integrity of the players are getting special treatment. League. Sophie Cunningham's goddammit reaction has become a rallying cry for everyone who's tired of watching games decided by whistles instead of basketball plays, and her frustration represents the feelings of millions of fans who just want to see fair competition. When players, coaches, and fans all recognize obvious bias in real time, it's time for the league office to take a hard look at how games are being officiated and whether the current system is serving the best interests of the sport. The fact that multiple camera angles showed Paige clearly shoving Sophie, yet the foul was called on the victim instead of the perpetrator, represents such a breakdown in basic officiating competence that it raises serious questions about whether these refs even understand the rules they're supposed to be enforcing. What makes this officiating disaster even more infuriating is the broader context of how different players get treated by WNBA referees depending on their status and marketability. Veterans like Sophie Cunningham, who have grinded their way through years of professional basketball and earned their respect through consistent performance, get treated like they're disposable pawns in the league's attempt to manufacture storylines around their chosen golden children. Meanwhile, rookies like Paige Bueckers get the kind of protection typically reserved for established superstars, creating an artificial competitive environment where talent and effort matter less than media narrative and draft position. It's a system that rewards hype over substance and punishes players like Sophie, who represent everything good about competitive basketball. The contrast becomes even more stark when you consider how Caitlin Clark was treated during her actual rookie season compared to how Paige Bueckers is being coddled during hers. Clark got mauled by defenders night after night without getting calls, was expected to earn every single point through pure skill and determination, and faced officiating that ranged from indifferent to actively hostile toward her success. She built her reputation by overcoming adversity and proving that her college dominance could translate to the professional level despite getting zero favors from the referees. Paige, on the other hand, is getting handed advantages that Clark never received, creating an uneven playing field that makes direct comparisons between their rookie campaigns completely meaningless. When the rules are applied differently for different players, statistics and achievements become worthless as measures of actual basketball ability. The timing of this officiating controversy couldn't be worse for the WNBA's credibility, especially as the league continues to grow in popularity and attract new fans who expect professional level competition and integrity. Basketball fans aren't stupid. They can recognize when games are being manipulated by officials who have forgotten their primary responsibility is to enforce rules fairly and consistently. Last night's disaster in Indianapolis will be remembered as a perfect example of how biased officiating can completely undermine what should have been a competitive and entertaining basketball game. New fans tuning in to see the sport they've heard so much about got treated to a clinic in how referees can destroy the viewing experience by inserting themselves into the outcome rather than letting the players decide the winner. This isn't just about one game or one controversial call. It's about the direction of WNBA officiating and whether skill and hard work will continue to be the determining factors in games, or whether certain players will get advantages that make competition feel predetermined. Sophie Cunningham showed last night that she won't be intimidated by biased refs or dirty plays, and Caitlin Clark's visible frustration from the bench suggests that the Fever won't forget how this game was taken from them. The stage is set for an epic rematch when these teams meet again, and you can bet that Indiana will be ready to prove that superior basketball can overcome even the most questionable officiating decisions when it matters most. When that rematch happens, every single call will be scrutinized by fans who remember exactly how Sophie got screwed in this game, and the pressure will be on these same officials to prove they can call a fair game when the spotlight is brightest.